Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SIG Network Policy PI meeting. Today is November the 4th, 2025. Let's follow the code of conduct and be nice to each other. So for today, I've more or less filled the agenda myself, but please feel free to add more things in there. It's our last meeting before the KubeCon, so we had a list of things we wanted to complete by that time. Unfortunately, there wasn't much progress in the last 2 weeks. So last week meeting, we ended with saying everything is going according to the plan. We're all good. At this point, not exactly that anymore. So a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One of them is the easiest one, hopefully, which is our conformance tests. And Antonio helped me debug a downstream failure that I saw, which is due to our host network ports usage in our conformance tests. So what we do now to test that host network pods work with cluster network policy, we use different ports in this range. So some random ports from there. Now, the problem is, and yeah, you can see maybe I should quickly show it how it looks like. There is one stateful set that is host networked, and it's basically, that's where all these ports are defined and used. Now, this port range interferes with the default ephemeral port range on most, I guess, or on lots of Linux-based systems. So that includes kind. And basically, the problem happens when some other process on the host is accidentally using the same port, which also, as you can imagine, like fails fairly rarely. So that's a tricky flake to catch. Now, the question I have is, should we change the port range to try and be less than this, like kind of normal? It's not strictly defined, but still, like, it's a common number to start the ephemeral port range from. So should we try and change these ports to be less than that? Or do we just say whoever runs the cluster should make sure like that these ports are not used, which is, there is a way also to do that, kinda. So any thoughts on that?
How hard would it be to make it configurable? I mean, it looked like they were sort of statically in this static YAML, so we'd have to like template the YAML or something, right? But
Yeah, and I think it's used in the test code itself also, so you kind of need to, yeah, and also, I mean, when you template that, if I'm running my conformance test, basically the port that is actually taken is every time different. So for me to run this test dynamically, I would have to go and find which ports are unbound on a given host, and it's
well, so
different on every node.
so the
Very
reason I was
dissimilar.
saying that, like, this is a problem in the upstream conformance tests as well. Like, in order to make OCP past the Kubernetes conformance test, you have to turn off the system firewall, right? Because otherwise it will interfere with some of the host network tests. And so it seems like it would just be good to be able to say, okay, we guarantee that you can do a test using these ports on this, and just say that whatever, so you could say use a port in this range, and then it will do that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds nice. I just actually don't really know how difficult that will be to implement, but I bet, yeah, somewhat difficult. But I mean, I could try that.
I just realized I am being, hello? Can people hear me?
Hello? Yeah.
I am Ida Rhodes. This is Bowie. So
Yes.
I'm not Ida Rhodes. Ida Rhodes is a
Okay.
famous computer science person.
I hope for a new contributor. Did you want to add something?
No, I was just making sure people knew I was here, because I
Okay,
just
cool.
realized I can't change my name. Like, it's not letting me do it.
Yeah, that's all right.
So Nadia, the other thing is, it sounds like this isn't an urgent problem. So
No.
if people think that the making it configurable idea is good, then if nobody has time to work on it right now, that's not a huge, we can get to it eventually, right?
Yes, I was just basically gathering ideas. So yeah, it's not urgent. I maybe will see if that is doable. Yeah. So yeah, okay, that's good. We won't waste too much time on that today. There are more urgent things to talk about. So, okay, next one was the last bit of cluster network policy docs. I think I've got a review from Boway and from Yang, actually. So I've addressed those. Please take another look. That pretty much needs to be merged before KubeCon for sure.
So
And yeah.
maybe I was hoping we would take a little bit of a, like, what do we need by KubeCon? And we do need to put together the slides. So
Yes,
like,
I mean, most of
are
the
we
things we have here
okay?
is that.
I was talking to Tim about this and it was like, well, you could just say this is subject to change, but it's not gonna, it's mostly like a syntactic sugar kind of thing. Do we feel confident with that statement?
So by that, you mean which part is syntactic sugar?
Whatever changes are coming, except for maybe adding the block all stuff, like that discussion, but the port protocol discussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's also
That's like
basically
syntactic
here.
sugar in my mind. It's like, well, it could be this way, it could be this way, and you just have some kind of criteria and choose one.
Yeah, I mean, we could, how to present that, I think, is another point, which is about making slides. So depending on where exactly we are in progress with this work, we could just say, okay, now we plan to make protocols more extensible. We won't show the exact YAMLs. We'll just say, yeah, it's like work in progress, but
Well, we can show
can now add
YAMLs, we
more
just
protocols.
don't. What I'm saying is, we can show YAMLs, we just have a little disclaimer that says, hey, this might get reworked, right? But it's not like it's going to get reworked where the functions disappear. Like,
Yeah, sure.
That's exactly the same stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that. I mean, it would be still, of course, nice if we could have, I mean, to get as close as possible to the actual final decision, and just then there is no need for being
No, I'm
extra
just,
vague.
for example, if that doesn't happen, it's still okay. We would just do what I just said. Like,
yeah, I mean, there is no.
Are people okay?
we have to present.
I guess the
something,
question
so,
is
yeah.
like, are people okay with that? Of course, we will still try to get it in, but if we don't, then then we do that alternative, right? Or we like schedule a meeting every day until we finish it, right? There's like different degrees of like how much we want to close it. I'm happy to meet every day to close it. But barring that, it's like, are we okay with like, yeah, disclaimer, like this might change a little bit? Because okay, so the other thing is, I don't see the one item which is like adding networks to ingress and or block, disallow all, allow all.
Yeah,
That
I
seems to be
definitely didn't
hang out, right?
expect that.
Everything seems to be reasonably well understood and like no further super duper discussion there. I'm trying to capture the state of the whole thing.
Yeah, so what I was trying to say is we didn't add these things, I think, to the V1 Alpha 2 goal, even though maybe we also should discuss that, because there are still all the same problems that we've always faced about the cubular probes and what all means and all these things. I don't think we can target.
Should that go into V1 Alpha 2 as an addition, which it seems okay, and then that would be between the KubeCon presentation and the beta, right? Like the kind of the discussion on that, like kubelet.
Yeah, that's
that, like it's we can't close that this week. Sorry, I'm trashing your agenda, by the way. I just want to make sure we talk
that's
about.
What. But of course, let's just add this to the agenda and talk about that and write down all the outcomes we can find. I mean,
I just want to make sure we have this discussion, because we're not going to have another discussion. We're going to show up in Atlanta. So.
I mean, we only have allow all for ingress, right, as another potential feature, which was somewhere here, I guess. Is there anything else that we should?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It seems like it's just these two. I just want to double check that that's the case. Like I'm not missing something, and we're not like missing something major.
But it looks like that's it, I guess, if no one's saying anything. So yeah, I will just add that to the agenda and we'll talk about that, if that's okay. Okay, so all the other things, again, that are, I guess, the CNP docs are absolutely needed to be merged before KubeCon, otherwise people won't be able to read anything anywhere. Okay, there was also kind of a quick question about the CNP install docs. So I was trying to update that too, but I couldn't quite decide by myself what's the right way to do that. So we used to release install YAML as an artifact for our releases. And now we don't do that anymore. So our getting started page says this is what you should apply to install ANP and BNP, and it's not even the latest version, but it's the last version that has this install YAML file. Now I'm wondering if we should start doing that again, or if I should just be pointing to the standard CRDs that we have under just a given tag in our repository.
What's in the previous install? Is it anything more than that, or is it like
Well, it was both ANP and BNP in the same file, I believe, but no, otherwise it's set.
Oh, yeah. I mean, isn't it easier now? We can just point to cluster thingy.yaml and
yeah, I mean, to update to the latest ANP BNP version, I will have to still do this release, which is the one that doesn't have install file. So, but I could just, it's still kind of bash command. You could copy it, and I put both files in there. I don't know.
That sounds reasonable to me. But you have to change this page because it still says the old stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a part of the current docs update because I just wasn't sure if we should wait, because it points to the released version. But I think it is reasonable to say for cluster network policy, here is like the current main branch version, so that people could also install it somehow and experiment with that maybe, because if we just wait until the release, it will be a bit later, and then probably makes sense to have the CNP docs.
I mean, that makes sense to me. Just send the PR then. I'm happy to review it.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to hear if you all agree that that makes sense, or if I should go and figure out how to do the install scripts again. I mean, yeah, that is pretty transparent and simple for now. Okay, I guess if there is no disagreement, I'll do a follow-up PR that will be small. Okay, now the big part of this is the protocol rework. Here is the link to the UNPAP. I think one of the biggest problems there for now is whether we want to support all the clients or not.
So I had and Dan, I don't know if systems can distinguish between an older client versus like who. We might want to write down like what the exact scenarios are. Like, is it a human who's an older client? Is it like a server that's an older client? Because the server case, as I said multiple times in comments, like from the server standpoint, being out of version skew is just one of n ways it could get corrupt configuration. And for the other cases where you get corrupt configuration, your response usually is, I'll just fail static and just alert, because, right, like you might do something really dangerous if you don't do otherwise. And that gives me a bit of a queasy feeling when we're trying to define how stuff behaves, assuming that the older client problem is the only way you would get basically kind of corrupt configuration. And you understand what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know if this is the solution, but maybe I'm happy to hear.
What do you mean by server? Do you mean network policy implementation, or?
I just feel like we have to be very specific about like what we're trying to tackle, right? Like,
okay, so what we're trying to tackle.
Client is a human using CLI. Client is a implementation, right?
What we're trying to conquer to deal with is the case where there is a CRD that defines a field. Some client of the API server creates an object using that field, and then the network policy implementation reads it in using an older version of the CRD such that it does not see that field at all.
Yeah, but like you can't distinguish that with like someone screwed up the system.
If somebody
And you've got-
screws up on their own, that's their fault, and yes, bad things will happen, but there's nothing we can do about it. This is a case of the user did nothing wrong, right? They used
No,
it
but they
just
wait, hang
defined
on.
on the API server.
So one, I think this case has to be written out in really full detail because this means that the infrastructure has upgraded their CRDs, but they have a lagging implementation,
Yes.
which is
Yeah, I
fine,
think we agree that's the only way to get there.
right? But from
So,
the
we have-
implementation, wait, hang on. So, but from the implementation's perspective, another way it could see corrupt configuration from its standpoint is if something got corrupted, right, on the path to receiving its configuration. What I'm saying is like, this is one of N ways in which an implementation could get something that is conceivably quote unquote corrupt. It doesn't understand.
You're talking about like, radiation from space could hit
No,
red.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real experiences where like people goofed up. They
Okay,
did
but if
something
people goof
wrong,
up, they can
there's
goof
a
up in
bug.
arbitrarily bad ways, and there's nothing we can do.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that because of that,
No. But like
Right, you
the
understand?
thing that we're talking about here is something that has repeatedly been an actual problem with network policy and gateway.
okay,
And
we
that is
should-
something we could have control over, which is another thing to this conversation. And
wait, hang on. So I think my main thing, I'm not, first of all, I'm happy to fix this problem. But I think it needs to be very like concretely set out, like how we're going to test that we actually fixed it in a programmatic way. For example, if we applied this kind of test of like, hey, we can have a new field, we apply it consistently throughout the entire API surface, right? Like, I think it's great that this thing has come up in this discussion of the ports and protocols, and we noticed it, and it's like a list of stuff and et cetera, but this thing can happen in other places where you have a list of stuff in a particular format, right? That's what I'm trying to say is like, if we're going to solve it, we should figure out like a generic statement rather than just focusing on this ports and protocols thing, and then just apply it uniformly across the whole API. Because this is just an example of something generic.
About being generic. It's just this field is an example of that. But whatever we
But we
decide
need to solve it
to apply to every field we have.
No, but the thing is, if we are saying this is a problem, then we should solve it generically across the whole API.
So it is our belief that it is solved everywhere except for the as yet undesigned protocols field.
Okay, now how do we test for that? Is there a programmatic test for that?
No, but it is something that should be verifiable just by looking at the syntax.
But when you look at the syntax, you go through some set of rules, right?
Sure, we could add a test for it, but we don't have one. Yes.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable if we added such a generic test. Okay.
Yeah, I think the question here
easier,
before we do that is whether we consider that a problem that is worth solving also this way, solving it this way. And
I just, yeah, like why I say we need a very specific programmatic way to check it is because from that, then your decisions are kind of very, not easy, but at least very straightforward, because it's just like you apply the rule and you're just like, does it pass or not?
So there is another way to work with that, which was, so here is when you design an API in a specific way that gives you results, which older clients can recognize that they don't understand something. There is another potentially ways to do that. One of them.
Let me ask you, okay, so I will say this, that, for example, at least as far as I know from the generated client, if you add fields, the generated client just like strips them out, right? Like there's no like error that you get when you pull the object out of the generated client for CRD.
Correct.
If the underlying syntax is like the underlying structure, data structure isn't quite matching. I'm just saying, like, as like someone who has, written and like managed these controllers for a while, like, I don't know if this necessarily is how this should be solved, but that's like a more generic statement about clients. So I
Exactly,
think, like,
because there is another way to solve that, as I was trying to mention, and what Dan like stated here in the gateway API problem, similarly, that you could try and see what version of the CRD you are basically parsing right now, trying to handle as a controller, and then try to figure out if your expected version of the CRD doesn't match or is older than what you've actually got, and then try to fail in whatever way we can define with that.
so yes. Now you hit on something very I have a bit of a cold, so I'm coughing, but you hit on something I think that kind of raised this issue for me, which is if you have to end up doing all these other checks, you can't fix this just with API structure, right?
This is an
And that's my
alternative,
biggest
not an
issue.
also.
Well, I think as long as we can write down what specific API structure cannot be used, that's fine. And I'm not super tied up on what particular reports and protocols looks like.
So my take on that was that as long as our API was designed anyway in a way that allowed us to check that, and we have the rules written down on what you should do when you get a peer that you don't recognize, that's okay. But now when this makes our API design decisions potentially more hard, and you can compare the different YAMLs in the enhancement for supported versus unsupported older clients protocols, I'm not that sure that just trying to fail, saying that the CRD is too old and like that the CRD is newer than what I can handle and just report an error on that is not a better idea. Because letting this thing drive your API design looks a bit strange to me. And then based on the discussion with Tim, I'm also not sure that we discussed adding additional TCP flags, which is also should be written somewhere here. So if you go with this older client supported way, oh, here it is. Imagine you add a flag at some point to the TCP match. To make sure this older client support is maintained, you need to add all possible combination of existing fields, because you need for it to be a one-off all the time so that the empty structure is rendered when you try to parse it, which basically whenever you add, it doesn't let you add any combinations of fields in the same structure that are flat. You need to literally add port with flag.
Yeah, this feels very
port
weird.
branch
And
with flag.
again, like we're solving like a versioning issue via structure, and it feels like it goes down like weird directions. Like, especially since it's not even written down what the specific rules are to avoid us to achieve through structure some sort of version awareness. I find is and not having the written rules, it's like we're doing it for this one specific thing. We say that no other fields are in this position, but sometimes a computer, when you apply an automated process, it finds things that you didn't think of.
So what Tim is talking about here is not just the old client problem. It's also doing things in what they believe is going to be the preferred style for declarative validation, where like you don't actually need to have the port range with flag and all that just for the old client thing. We did this with port ranges in regular network policy, where you had the port field, and then to make ranges work in a backward compatible way, we added the port end or something like that field. So that if you don't see that, then you only get one port rather than all ports. There are various things we could have done here that would have been backward compatible, but Tim didn't like how they looked with respect to declarative validation.
Right, but
Yeah,
declarative validation also doesn't let you have multiple fields in the same struct, and then if you add more fields in the future, you will end up with these kinds of structs.
declarative validation is also a moving target. It's not
Yeah.
like complete.
I think you can you could avoid having the combinatorial number because of fields, like the cross product of all flags or whatever, by like you could have TCP protocol v2 and that has your new fields in it, and you just do like an upgrade. I wonder if there's some trick we're missing there where you could have like explicit versioning where, you know, when you create your new policy with new fields in it,
Like, I think all these sound
says
interesting, but the API machinery just doesn't support this today. And I also wonder, like, we are devoting a lot of time on kind of making this work out in this generic rule, but the generic rule has not been vetted across all APIs, right? Like that's, I think one of the key things, at least from a design perspective, is that it is consistent, because that's how AIs will use it. That's how humans like to understand things. And if we invent like a clever thing that we did for this, right, and it's not consistent everywhere else, I have concerns. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I would love to have the API machinery support what you want, Sean, but it's just like, it's going to be super awkward, I think.
Well, we could have like a spec field and then a spec v2 field and a spec v3 field. I don't know.
Right, but that's not consistent with like almost anything else. I
Yeah.
think if it was like the whole project was like, yeah, let's do it that way, and it's like, great.
That's the thing. I feel like the high level kind of versioning for the APIs, like it's got so ossified where like you can't go to a beta 2 and you can't have like a GA version 2 because you split it into two buckets, and that you can't have like a mix of them in the same cluster without a lot of pain. It feels like we've made a mistake there where you can't have like subversions of your resource that all coexist and have like intelligent ways to go, oh, this is not one I can handle in your client. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's like 100% probably like some like very deep root cause.
So I also wanted to talk about these structured parameters, basically, which is also a part of this conversation. I think the only field that is missing that as of now is that we have port and port range at the same time. So if we just move it under port and have the number and range, as I think was in one of the examples, then you could add all the new fields that have to be potentially compatible with this field of ports and can be applied at the same time, and then that's pretty declarative.
Yeah,
but doesn't work for the old clients.
So the declarative validation, I think, like, I don't know if this, I would just kind of ignore it for now because it's still pretty early, right? Like, I think designing with that as a target, it's like you don't even know, like, because they might be like, oh, I figured out how to solve that problem. And it's like, oh, we like structured everything to avoid a problem that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and we also started this whole design with saying we want a pretty YAML, and then we try to figure out how to write that down. So now it's turning kind of totally around, I guess. And
we'd given up on that idea already, though. Like
have we?
Yeah, but Bowie's original PR got rid of some of the pretty YAML ideas, and we eventually decided that, you know.
Well, I mean, there's pretty YAML, and then there is config structure because the implementation, like, I think, again, like getting back to my sort of first principles, which very nebulous, is like, it has to be, you know, like consistent and not like a one-off clever thing, is my general take. Like, it's okay if it's a little bit more verbose, but it's not okay if it just becomes like kind of clever in the local spot. Like, if it's like, we're going to be clever, we should apply the cleverness like everywhere.
So
okay, so I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, here's a controversial suggestion. What if we
Please.
close the PR and ship V1 beta alpha 2 and V1 beta 1 with the same ports field that we have now, which does not provide any way to support ICMP, but is at least tested and understood. And then when and if we want to support ICMP, we can figure that out.
But is the current thing that much different?
Didn't we
Like
have,
it just seems
we
like
have the
I don't
point of
know. Like,
sliced business?
Yeah, we'll fix the pointer to slice part, but other than that, we'll leave everything else the same.
oh, shoot, I'm getting kicked out of my room.
But can't we,
I will be
so
back.
if we are fine with just having all the same disadvantages as what current implementation has, we could also just rename protocols, but then otherwise leave everything as is, so kind of meet halfway.
I would have to think about that, but I think the current design, I'm not sure it would make sense called protocols. I don't know. I guess I would have to look at it, see what that looks like. Maybe you're right.
Okay, but okay, basically, so there are two things we would need to solve if we try to continue with that, which is what we do with the old clients and what we think about just how's it called? Validation. Descriptive validation, is it? Anyway, these two things. Do we have any statement on that, or like, do we agree that it is fine to try and reject CNPs for older clients when they can see from whatever the API we ended up having that there is a field that they don't recognize, but we shouldn't use that for our API design, and then we switch to trying to telling the clients basically to check the version of the CR they're handling?
Sorry. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Edith.
Ah, you'll get all the different names. I don't know, like we should challenge ourselves to kind of get this in. I don't think we can't solve it, right? And it feels like if we move this, if we let the current structure just slide in, then it makes it harder for future us.
Yeah, I agree with that. We'll have to solve that eventually anyway.
Yeah, it's like, you know, we all have that experience where it's like, well, future us is not us right now, but future us does hate former us. So is the biggest issue just the older clients issue? Because if we write that down in a generic way, then we can just apply a rule and then we can just move on, right? Like,
Unclear. I haven't read the PR lately, but you know, the stuff that Nadia was showing there was really more about declarative validation than older clients. So I'm not sure
I would just
who was objecting about what.
It's
I
both,
would
I
just
think.
be very careful about declarative validation because that's like a moving target. So I would kind of
I
ignore
agree.
it.
But these things I'm showing, they also are important for the older clients.
But there are ways of dealing with the older clients without the API explosion there. Like that
How?
API explosion is strictly about being able, the fact that declarative validation will let you say exactly one of these fields must be set, but it won't let you say exactly one of these and then any number of those must be set.
Yeah, but
Well, I mean,
older,
that's
if you
because
add
they
a
don't
new
want you to
field
sell.
that is not a one-off, older clients won't see them.
But you can potentially define things in a way that that's okay.
You mean how to behave
Okay.
in that case?
Yeah.
I
So
don't think you can, though.
can, like, Dan, do you have time to write down like some very short statement about what we check for the older client issue?
Oh, there is
'Cause-
one in our
I
docs.
think it is stated, it's basically the requirement that exactly one field should be set in those structs where we care about it. So when you have a strict like that, if you have strict alternation and you must set exactly one, then you decode it as an empty struct if you're an old client, and that is invalid. So
we did define in the docs there exactly how to react.
Yeah,
every
it's like
kind
it's
of
like
rule.
all weaved into like in the specific example. But it would be good to be like arbitrary struct S with fields A, B, C, like.
In network policy, we had the advantage that it was always deny, and so we could make that assumption. I'm realizing that, for instance, we could not have extended port into port range in admin network policy the same way that we did in regular network policy, because you need to do something different when you don't see the end range in an accept rule than you would do if you didn't see the end range in a deny rule.
Right.
So in fact, yes, the old client compatibility constraint does essentially force us into the one of constraint.
Yep.
So, okay, is that sufficient in all cases? I'm very skeptical that structural things can fix this problem, by the way. Like,
so the reason why it fixes it is because it guarantees that if you get something containing a field you don't recognize, you will see it as a completely empty struct, which is illegal. And so you can say, aha, there must have been something dropped here.
right, but is that possible in today's generated client for the controller to see that?
Yes, you would get a struct where all of the pointer fields were nil, despite the fact that validation requires one of them to be not nil.
I see. Okay, so one of is the only mechanism that we can leverage here. I'm just like
that we've thought of.
feel very uncomfortable.
I wanted also to ask, like, we do have this fallback and like, how do we call that? Fail close to something instructions for every type of rule. But I'm also not quite convinced that it's better than just like not handling the object and trying to throw an error on that.
Yeah, that's my comment, is that in all implementation I've seen in production, you fail static and then you alert like crazy because something went wrong, and it might not be this particular problem. Like the database could have been corrupted.
So, okay, so throw errors how?
Through alerting. Every production system I run and I know of has alerting where it basically is like, oh, something went wrong.
But we also have status, right?
Implementations
it has status, it has alerting, basically it's just like, oh crap. In most systems, it's just like you should fail static, and then maybe you have some repair, but the repair has to be very, like, it's like super complicated at that point. This is from my personal experience running these things, like at fairly large scale.
We've always had problems when we fail. Whenever we fail static, it's usually our installation operator that fails static if it can't progress for some reason. And the problem is that like people just don't notice, and then weeks later they try to upgrade Calico or something, or change a config, and it doesn't roll out, and then we get a support call saying, oh, this didn't, I changed this config and nothing happened. And it turns out that there was an error that was preventing the rollout, certificate expired, or a, you know, some random thing that was preventing the rollout. It's really hard to make sure that your alerts are seen in a generic Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, on the other hand, I think this is like a fairly long discussion, but like maybe the fail static was okay because the choice that you had made for the user would have resulted in problems. But Dan has a hand.
So the last paragraph in this comment here, you know, is saying that, you know, no matter what we do, there's a possibility that you could completely break your cluster here, right? Like once we accept an admin network policy that we cannot correctly interpret, then there's nothing we can do in the general case that is safe. Where like, because it sounds like what you're saying, I mean, you're talking about alert only about the bad admin network policy, but keep obeying all the other admin network policies, right? But then in
Well,
that case,
no, in that case, I would probably, depending on the degree and some tenant isolation, you would probably fail static pretty, because it's like,
fail static as in block all network traffic.
no, that's not fail static. Fail static as in the config system, there's something messed up with config system, right? You're getting corrupt configuration.
So what do you do specifically?
You basically don't take in new configuration while you're trying to get that resolved.
Okay, but so you can only create one admin network policy at a time. So if the administrator tries to create a bunch of admin network policies, one of them's bad, they still might potentially have created other policies that depended on the bad one before the bad one.
No, so the thing is, we're talking about a different kind of bad. There's bad where they messed up, there's bad where it's corrupt and it can't be interpreted by the system.
Right.
Right? Those two things are very different from a, okay, I'm talking from a managed provider perspective.
No,
Right.
but I'm talking about the administrator has some idea of how they want network traffic to work. They ask us to do something that we can't do. At that point,
No. Well, that's different because the situation I'm describing is where you put the infrastructure itself in a self-inconsistent state, right?
Are you assuming some sort of atomic configuration change mechanism?
No. This maybe we shouldn't go too far into
anyway,
this.
so my argument is that once they create an admin network policy that the implementation cannot interpret correctly, there is no correct behavior at this point. And that what we should do is block like we should require implementations to have a validating admission controller that prevents it from accepting any policy that the implementation won't be able to do the right thing with.
No, that I unheard. I already assume that exists, right?
Okay, well, I mean, it
So I'm
doesn't
saying that
currently.
Sure, but that's what the validation is for, no?
The validation validates against the CRD, which we're saying is not necessarily the same thing as what the implementation supports.
Okay, I mean, in some ways though, so we expect a totally normal case for a user to upgrade to like many versions beyond with the CRD, but the implementation is still pretty old. I think I mean, that just sounds like, is that ever going to work?
I mean, it doesn't have to be many. It can just be one.
I think the handling one is a special case because then you can talk about skew and the fact that it won't persist, right? When you talk about, or do we just restrict ourselves? That's what I'm talking about. Like, what is that specific rule that we're checking? Is it just one revision, and then it's a temporary situation versus one or multiple revisions, but it's a permanent thing? Like permanent as in it's going to stick around for arbitrary amounts of time. Does that make sense? Like that's sort of the definition of like what we want to target for handling some of these things.
I don't think there is any temporary, any relevant temporary situation here. If the admin creates a policy using a rule that you don't support, it saying, oh, well, it's only temporarily going to give access to the entire internet is not going to make the administrator that much happier than, it will permanently give access to the entire internet.
Why would it? So wait, hold on. So what I'm saying is more the different journeys that we need to support in terms of these error conditions, right? I'm not talking about specifically like, hey, they accidentally gave access or whatever. That's like a specific example that came out of one of the journeys. Maybe I'm not making myself very clear, but like what I'm saying is like in some limit, if you let the CRDs evolve past where the implementation understands it, you're going to have a very hard time making it all work. So we need to put some bounds on like what that looks like.
Yes, we could say that there's maximum skew, although, yeah, we currently have no way of like figuring that out.
But even just from like a design principles perspective, it would just be good.
But,
Again,
but,
I don't.
anyway,
we don't need
but that
here,
doesn't
but I'm
matter
saying-
though. Like in the one version skew case, there can still be horrible critical errors. So you know, worrying about the larger skew case doesn't solve this problem that we're talking about now, or you know.
Yeah, I just, again, we don't have to solve it here. I'm happy to restrict this to just the ports and protocols discussion. But, you know, we should have like a generic rule that's like written in terms of like struct S and field Y, right? Like instead of like specific fields.
Yep.
And then some abstract model of like some semantics. Sorry, I'm betraying my academic background as like programming languages, right? And then that basically we just apply it across all the API, and then we have a reasonable guarantee that we've like did the right thing in all the places, right? And it's consistent.
So I think the question is, we do have a set of predefined rules on how to behave, right?
But that
Now, it didn't.
Those
Yeah.
rules assume you can recognize.
Yes, exactly. So and that apply to that. Right now, the question is, are we ready to change these rules and define some new way of failing?
I think we should write those rules down in the doc, by the way.
I mean,
They are.
It's kind of hard to find. Oh, they are?
Yep.
So is it okay? And basically continuing to support these rules will result in potentially difficult to extend the API that I was sharing before. And the question is, do we like these rules enough to accept that API limitation that we always have a one-off kind of rules and protocols matches? Or do we say that the API is too ugly, cumbersome, whatever, and we will try to define some other rules?
So I don't think we like these rules at all. Like,
do they work? That's the problem.
the rules are just how to deal with a bad situation in the least bad way. If we could find a better way to avoid getting into the bad situation, we would like that better.
So for example, the deny becomes a deny all. Doesn't that like blow up the cluster like potentially? I'm just
But that's a very nice alert.
The last comment says. So the goal of the three rules is ensure that any packet that should be denied according to the unrecognized rule does get denied. And if that means we deny too much, then we deny too much. And then that has the potential bad side effect that you just said. But if we're going to allow ourselves to get into the situation where we have accepted a network policy that contains a rule we don't understand, that seemed like the best way to deal with it.
I mean, from your user's standpoint, would they rather you fail static or they'd rather you?
I still don't understand what you mean when you say fail static.
Fail static is you just don't update and you alert, right? You stop accepting changes to the config. But as in your internal implementation, this is like, I think.
But you can't really do that, right? If you've been upgraded and you're running and now someone applies this new CR.
Right, no, he's saying like if you get an admin network policy and you can recognize that it contains a rule that you don't understand, then you just stop accepting new network policies at that point.
Well, it's slightly different. You stop updating the actual programming that denies stuff, but there's obviously downsides to that, right? But
like
what I'm saying is like
pods will.
Anyways, I will write it up because I feel like there's some subtleties and we need to kind of think this through. The rules sort of make sense on the small, but on the large, especially on the cluster wide, like deny all sounds like super dangerous.
Yes.
Okay, should we then try to write down another way to handle CRDs with newer versions that you can handle?
I think we should investigate what we would need to do to make this situation impossible. Like, for instance, if we say the CRD must be installed by the implementation and nobody else, it's completely invalid to update the CRD behind the implementation's back, then we can declare this problem non-existent. And that
I
is,
slightly disagree with that, but it's okay as like one of the, I think that's like a necessary step, is to make sure that you don't get completely out of version skew beyond something that we defined.
so, and Nadia, seeing what you just wrote there, it's not necessarily that, because another thing that we could do is the thing that I had suggested in the gateway bug, where using the unversioned, or yeah, the unversioned whatever client, not unversioned, whatever it's called, you know,
Unstructured.
What?
Was it unstructured?
Unstructured. There we go. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. You know, you can recognize when a field is about to get dropped, and well, I guess we've already, well, so that would require you to have so having a validating admission controller, you know, to reject the thing before it is applied, is another possibility.
So what you're saying is basically you would have a validating webhook that is an older CRD version's validation, kind of.
You would have a validating admission hook that used the unstructured client and sees if that gives it the same thing as the generated client. And if they're different, then it knows that means that there was something that's not part of your generated CRD code. The details don't matter anyway, but you know, it would basically, the validating admission hook would detect if there is stuff you won't be able to deal with and reject the policy in that case.
Yeah, I mean, that one sounds reasonable.
Okay, can you say that again so that I try to write it down?
I can write it down.
Oh, okay, that also works. Okay, so I guess, do we agree that older clients is an actual problem we have been trying to solve, so we need to figure something out? For the
Definitely, for sure, the version skew and the upgrade, that needs to 100% solved. I think like we also should just put a bound on that problem. We can't just say like you can go from like version 1 to 10, right? Like that probably is just like,
I mean, does it
why
help
would we solve
anything?
it? It
It's
does.
good to say probably, but
I mean, it helps some things, but it doesn't help this problem, because you can get this problem with a single version skew, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is, yes, let's tackle this problem, but we should also clarify we're not going to tackle like some arbitrary evolution, right? Like there has to be
sure,
some
that's just a
bound.
doc update, so that makes sense. Can we decide whether we care about the, how it's called again, structure, declarative validation or not?
So declarative validation, I would just kind of park it, because, you know, maybe what we come up with, they end up taking as like, oh, we should figure out how to solve that problem. You know what I'm saying? It's like so still pretty early, so
I mean, we'll
fix
have
the
to go through
problem,
the
design around.
API review. So maybe if the API reviewer disagrees, we will get back to that discussion. And for now, we, as a group, agree.
You know, I can lobby Tim or whatever, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, so then I guess the next question is that's a problem that exists anyway. Do we think we can find any solution, or even?
So like I would frame this as like a more generic problem. Is like it seems pretty clear with the protocols we will have future unanticipated fields, not just like ports or something. And you know, like what is a generic way to deal with that? Because one of the things is this like one-off with all the combinations, which is, or as Sean mentioned, like one-off, but instead of combinations, you have like versions. Is there something clever we can do there? My only concern is if we do something clever for our specific case, it's like just a local cleverness, and that one becomes just inconsistent from a user and config understandability. But I do think we should tackle it, because it's like, why not? If not now, then when?
Yeah, so basically we have two ways to go about the whole protocols and PEP, right? Try to close it as basically Dan suggested, and then postpone the problem and see if there is any intermediate solution, or whatever, basically ignore the problem and leave it to future us, or we actually try to solve that somehow and define the new protocols field, well, as soon as we can, I guess. And we present at KubeCon wherever we are at that point.
Yeah, so like, again, as I said, this seems like more of like a structural thing versus like, will the implementation have this capability and be able to express it in the API? Do other people feel like that? Because like we're trying to solve a structural problem, but it doesn't change what functionally is going to be available.
Right. We agree on the allowed semantics. We're just having trouble figuring out the right syntax.
So Nadia, I think like for the KubeCon, whatever we come up with, we just present it as like tentative. And we could even explicitly say, I mean, we should explicitly say like, hey, these are the various structural things we're still working through. Hopefully we have a solution, but like, right. And then I think that sets up the right expectations.
I mean,
because what we don't
Yeah,
want to
so
present is like, oh, it's like missing. And then people are like, but what about this? That is like very obvious. Like,
Dan, you're saying?
oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, we can say we're realizing that, you know, this redesign may have some problems with future compatibility, so we're trying to figure out that problem right now.
So for the NPEP, I'm trying to figure out what I should do. Are you saying we claim this problem as a separate thing and like ignore it for now somehow, or we try to solve it in the protocol NPEP right now?
I think like, I think one of the things is that MPEP is like pretty long now. So should we, if you want to keep it open, this is all my opinion, by the way. If you want to keep it open, like maybe we should frame the generic problem at the top and just like basically just rewrite. We can keep all the content, just move it down, but then.
So I
like
can
a
open a
reference.
new NPEP for that problem specifically and just reference that, and we discuss it there if that's easier.
It seems like
Do you think
having an NPEP for the future expandability problem might be good. Because, you know,
Okay.
like Bowie
that's
was saying,
fine.
we want to have our official policy documented, right?
Yeah, I know it's,
Yeah, but
you guys, I keep asking like it is in the comments, but I don't think it's as obvious, and we probably need to lift it to some like higher level doc.
yeah, the point is current protocols design breaks and we are over time. So I don't know what's the best way to make this decision. The current NPEPs for protocol breaks our current statement on the older client. So
I mean, I'm happy
can't
to
really ignore it.
Yeah, I'm happy to give this a shot if you want me to write it up this week, and then I'm happy to chat on Slack as we get to KubeCon. I think like maybe we could just in the KubeCon presentation just be like, here's the current thing, which is Dan's like, let's close it and kind of, and then here's some proposed stuff. Like that seems like okay.
I mean, I'm not sure closing current NPEP will help anything. There is some kind of valuable info in there. Anyway, okay, I don't know. Maybe let's try to discuss that in Slack, considering we're over time. I'm not sure what's the best next step here.
So just one thing is, Nadia, the CRD unit testing, I updated with respect to your comments. Do you mind taking another look?
Hey, didn't I merge it?
Oh, did you merge already? Sorry, I didn't check this morning.
Yeah, please check. I think I did.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. Okay, you merged
sure.
it, yes. Yeah,
yeah,
that is
then
actually super useful for trying out creating examples. So
yeah, that is true. Okay, and then I don't know, should we also try to discuss that in Slack, the last point, whether we should include the new ingress allow all?
this one's we're over time, but I think Sean, it seems like something needs to be done, right? Like it seems a little weird not to have it. Some solution.
Yeah, I feel like we need a way to say I
Deny
think
all or allow all.
I think CNP is not going to be useful to a lot of folks if you can't say allow all or deny all. I mean, if you want to change your cluster's disposition to, default deny, people don't mean default deny within the cluster. They mean default deny, damn it. They mean deny everything unless I tell you otherwise. Um, I think we need to solve that soon.
So do you think there are two, I think, main problems that we've been talking about forever, which is basically what all means and then how to make kubelet probes work. There are some suggestions in the issue. Should we try and all review the NPAP to see if we're close to some agreement? Because if we, and then after that, consider if we add it for V1 Alpha 2, because it's like unsolvable problem and we can't find any reasonable solution or whatever. That wouldn't make much sense to block the V1 Alpha 2 for that, because I mean, it still could always be added later.
So the question for me is, yeah, people want to say deny all, but is having deny all without having allow from CIDR sufficient? Or are we pulling in Ingress networks as well?
I'm in favor of having Ingress networks. I think deny all is even more fundamental because there's some nice things you can build with that. I think it would be enough to get like the tenancy thing off the ground. If you can do deny all, we could write that controller that generates policies and do it in a race-free way. I pointed that in the issue. I mean, maybe not every use case that we had for tenancy. I haven't thought through every use case, which is why I didn't want to tie this up with tenancy. But certainly one way of doing tenancy kind of falls out if you can have a deny all in your admin tier.
It seems like at least
I guess the question you're getting at, Dan, is if we're going to do the CIDR thing, then should we just do the CIDR thing and avoid having a kind of sigil all piece?
And what I was saying was adding just allow deny all sounds really simple, but if it's not going to be useful without Ingress, and then if Ingress turns out to be tricky, then suddenly it's a much bigger problem. And so we need to decide, is it going to pull in allow or allow all from networks?
I think it's useful even if you don't pull that other stuff in. I think we should do CIDRs. I think it's a pragmatic thing to do. And I think as we add more features, it becomes less useful, but it's always going to be somewhat useful for a decent subset of people. That's my particular take on it. I think
I just don't see getting out of it.
Yeah,
it's so basic. Like,
okay, I guess the question is, do we?
Going to be like, where's my networks, right?
No, I'm not talking about getting out of it forever. I'm talking about, do we want to have to deal with Ingress networks for V1 Alpha 2?
So the thing that for me this decision hinges on is if it's possible to define all just-in networks, and that one was less clear to me. Like it was possible.
I think
so the kubelet probes and all those other things, right?
I prefer having it be its own thing because I think it's really easy to forget to do the IPv6 one if you're doing your denial rule. I think it goes back to the, we've got the exactly one field set rule, and I think if we didn't have that exactly one set rule for the back compatibility angle, we wouldn't have even blinked. We'd have just had allow and deny all by default. It would just be what you get if you don't set anything. It's just we've created that rule for the back compatibility reason, which is a good reason. I'm not saying it's not. Just we kind of ended up in this weird place where there isn't an obvious way to do to say allow or deny all. I think the cap was also kind of a bit specific to internal traffic within the cluster, possibly to dodge some of these questions, but I just don't think you can dodge them. I think it's going to come up straight away when you try to use this for anything practical. I think you're going to have to deal with ingress, and yeah, we probably should be pragmatic to start with and then add more features as we come up with them.
So what about the API we have now for beta 1 and allow deny all and ingress CIDRs for V1 beta 2?
That works for me. I mean, they're strictly additive, right?
Should be.
Yeah, I think this is a case where we can add it and it's not a problem. I also think for the back compatibility issue, it's really good to think about it. But when we're going from these named versions, you know, V1 Alpha 1, V1 Alpha 2, beta 2, those things, like those are all like breaking, not that they're all changes that require big changes to the implementations to support the new CRD version. So we kind of get out of needing to do the back compatibility design for that. We can almost kick the can down the road a little bit.
I think theoretically you're allowed to break API in beta APIs, but it's very frowned on. Like,
I mean, not a breaking change in the sense of like, I mean, we can add a new field and we can say, if you want to support beta 2, you must support the new field.
Yeah, I think generally is like if we move fast, most of that is not an issue. The places where people have gotten very angry, I know personally, is like you go hang around forever, like ingress, and then it's like not even a beta anymore, even though it says beta.
The other thing is, for now, the vendors are shipping the CRD with the implementation. So we kind of sidestep it a little bit for now. I know that there's ideas in the future that, you know, a particular version of OpenShift would ship with a particular cluster network policy. And then if you replaced, you know, if you put Calico on your OpenShift cluster, we'd have to live with the version that you wanted on your OpenShift cluster or in a public cloud, for example. If you're doing that, then like that
Right, but that's actually a implementation that's ahead of the CRD. But I guess you could be behind, but that would be weird.
I think the most common case where it would come up is you upgrade your OpenShift cluster that is shipping the CRD, and you don't think to upgrade Calico at the same time, or whatever your network policy plugin is at the same time. That's very common. People upgrade their Kubernetes cluster on a 6-month basis, and then they don't think to upgrade all of their infrastructure pieces. I find that very common.
For the record, we installed the admin network policy CRD as part of OVN Kubernetes. So if you were running Calico in OpenShift, you would get Calico's copy of the CRD, not the one we're using. So that should still work. But
yeah, I think that's the across the board kind of thing at the moment. But I can see in future that the model would change and we need to be more careful. But I think for now we can be a little bit more lax, but we should definitely design the API in a way that lets us evolve it.
Right. Okay, so
the whole idea for beta, I think, was to try and you wanted to summarize something.
So Sean, I think you already have that MPEP out for the all, right? So maybe we update it with this current discussion, because we just it sounded like we can add it in beta 1 and then maybe the networks as well. So then we have some time to hammer it out.
An experimental feature anyway, right?
I asked this question somewhere whether it makes sense to have experimental features in beta at all, or I guess once we go to beta, we have to figure out how we're doing experimental. But
I think there is like definition of that from the Gateway API, where basically for a field to be promoted to standard, it has to meet the level of the API standard that you're promoting it to. So if it's in beta, then you need the kind of beta API level of API review for that or something. And that's how it goes.
I mean, Gateway basically gave up on the alpha beta.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's whatever, alpha versus V1. I don't know what's there.
They just have like stable and experimental track. And it feels
Yeah.
like if their experience is good, which sounded like sort of, then maybe that's something that we could just flip to after beta. Like,
Yeah, so exactly when
it's kind of like
we
a
wanted
moot discussion.
to release some version of beta, and that's why doing CNP, which is a breaking change, and then protocols potentially, which is another breaking change, is absolutely crucial for that. But everything else that is additive could be done later.
Right. So then like probably
Yeah.
I'm just looking ahead, we would anticipate like at some point alpha beta just becomes the channeling thing and
Yeah.
and it's less of a disc, like it's not really part of it anymore.
Yeah, but whatever we release in beta, we don't want to break, I think, at any time. So maybe we should talk about the beta definition again, or just try to read whatever we agreed on last time. Let's just try to work on the NPAP that Sean has. And I don't think it has to be blocking for now, but maybe we can discuss that when we are doing slides or like at KubeCon, how exactly we present that. I don't know if there are any strong feelings of adding that for V1 Alpha 2 necessarily.
I think we should keep V1 Alpha 2 with what we had already planned on and just agree that yes, all and Ingress networks are pretty high priority to add soon after.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I think like from a user standpoint, the fact that it's very clear it's going to be added would be like sufficient, right? You don't have to feel the question. It's just like, how come this fundamental thing doesn't exist?
Yeah, sounds good, but that means we still need to figure out that part basically. So maybe in the next couple of days, we should try to focus on that and see if we can find any solution.
So who wants to work on it? Like, I'm happy to give it a shot, or Nadia, like.
I can just, or whoever can just move the existing description of the problem. I can do it also from the protocols NPAP to the new one.
Okay.
Because I did put
maybe
some of the details in there.
If you don't mind, I will do it just so that I can understand it, because it seems like I missed a bunch of context. So maybe
Sure.
it's
Just
worthwhile for me to do it.
make sure to include there is an old clients kind of subsection here. So just take a look and copy preferably some of the examples there. It's too long to show.
Yeah, I just
Here.
the solution through structure always seems like you get into some sort of dead end, but that's a statement based on no actual evidence. Well, some evidence, but like not through thinking through a lot. It feels like you need something more from API machinery to make this actually work out.
Yeah,
like, for example,
so I
generated
guess
client should tell you like there's extra fields. Like this just seems weird that that's missing.
So I guess I'll just wait for your NPAP on that topic and put somewhere here that it's like blocked until we solve that one.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay, we should maybe try to do that sooner than later then, because that actually blocks the V1 Alpha 2 and beta. Okay, sounds like a plan, I guess.
Okay.
All right, thanks all
so
then.
folks will be on Slack. Just ping on Slack.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, anything else for today? Yeah, there is some Slack conversations that need to happen.
Oh, Dan, just randomly, do you know if Surya is going to be around this week?
She is. She's been on PTO on and off for the
Okay.
last 2 or 3 weeks, but yeah, she's coming to KubeCon.
Okay, cool. All right, well, excited to see you guys there. If not, well, we won't see each other earlier, but if you're going to Atlanta, excited to see you guys.
Yep. Okay. Well,
Make
let's
it
have
this
a
time,
nice
but you
KubeCon.
guys enjoy.
What was that, Sean?
I said I can't make it this time, but you guys enjoy. I'm
We'll
sure
try.
there'll be a bunch of Higera folks there. Casey and I'm not sure who else is going.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll come back with everything we've discussed, hopefully nicely documented as always. Okay, thank you all then for joining. See you later.
Bye.